Good afternoon and welcome to Dynamic TV yet again. Jay Mathieson here joining you on what is the third part of our interview series with our Managing Director, Dean Watt, where we will talk about the sales process and what goes into, I suppose, looking for a horse beforehand. But before we get any further, let's welcome Dean. Dean, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be back, and hopefully my viewing audience has enjoyed the first two parts of our interview so far, and this one hopefully will take you through the processes involved in the auction sales and what's involved in selecting tomorrow's champions.
Look, Dean, there's obviously a lot of work that goes into selecting each horse, even before you get out to the sale and thinking about purchasing them. Could you tell us a little bit about what goes into that process beforehand?
Certainly. Most people don't realise the volume of work that does go into selecting horses at a yearling sale. It's not simply a case of just turning up the day before and saying there's a pretty one and we'll just put our hand up. Far from it. Basically what happens is that we've identified over 30 years of doing this type of work that traditionally we acknowledge that there are certain trends where thoroughbred sire lines and broodmare sire lines, when mated together, have a higher propensity to produce stakes class horses compared to when they're crossed with other similar lines. Why that happens, nobody can tell you. We've spoken with professors of genealogy, and we've spoken to many a high-grade breeder right throughout the thoroughbred world, but the reality is very simple. We acknowledge that it happens, and this has gone back to the days of Theseo and all the way through to modern breeding eras. Why, we don't know, but it's silly to not to acknowledge that there is a compatibility between certain sire lines and to ignore it. So in essence, what we have identified is that we can break down the breeding patterns of every thoroughbred that's put forward into a sale. And through the advancement of software nowadays and with the data that's available to be stored, we can go and look at certain sire lines and how they've crossed with broodmare sire lines right around the world. And we have been able to, through this data, identify lines that work. And we can break that down into basically 5 grades. And to make it easy for most people to follow, we broke it into the old school report card, A, B, C, D, and F for fail. And what we acknowledge and what we know and statistics tell us is that approximately there are 20,000 yearlings born in Australia every year. Now, sure, that will vary from year to year, but we'll use 20,000 as the base number. What we have been able to prove year after year is that there are approximately 5,000 born into A grade. From there, that means that there is 15,000 born into the higher pools, being B, C, D and F. But I can tell you that over 70% of stakes winners come from that 5,000 in A grade, whilst only 30% of stakes winners come from the other 15,000 that are bred. So obviously you want to buy horses that are bred to be successful as opposed to horses that are bred to be unsuccessful or the nick hasn't worked. Now it takes a lot of time to develop this. It's not just simply a matter of identifying sire line over broodmare sire line. You also have to look at a whole heap of other environmental factors and hemisphere factors. Some horses have been bred, and these statistics are inflated from overseas in the northern hemisphere, whilst others here in the southern hemisphere also skewer the statistical data. For example, in the northern hemisphere, in America for example, there's a lot of dirt racing. We don't perform that down here. Also, your statistical data can be inflated or skewered by how many black type races there are in each country. For example, in Australia there's only about 2.7% of our stakes races, black type races, part of the program, where in New Zealand it's 9.7, yet in Ireland it's 11.3. So you're going to have unbalanced things. We take all that data into account when we're determining our factors, but we come back to the base knowledge that A-grade horses produce over 70% of stakes winners. We only shop by looking at A-grade horses.